Today we're going to learn how to change fractions to decimals. The first thing you should always check when looking at a fraction and deciding what decimal it's equivalent to is if the denominator of the fraction goes into 100. Remember from previous lessons that if you have a denominator that goes into 100, or if you have a fraction over 100, for example, 17 over 100, the decimal is 17 hundredths. So there's really no work involved. If you have, for example, 5 over 100, you just need to make sure that the 5 was in the hundredths place. So it's 5 hundredths. So when you're looking at a fraction like 8 twentieths, if you can make the denominator 100 by multiplying by a value of 1, so 20 times 5 is 100, so multiplying by 5 over 5, you can see that this is 40 over 100, which you could write as 40 hundredths or 4 tenths, because you don't need that extra zero. So like I said, the first thing you should do is check if the denominator goes into 100, and if it does, change it to 100 and then just write the decimal from there. So what do you do when a fraction doesn't go into 100? We need to remember that fractions are division problems. So what we are going to do is we are going to divide. Okay, so let's look at the fraction 3/8. If we're looking at 3/8 and we're trying to take change 3/8 to a decimal, 8 does not go into 100. So because of that, we're going to divide. So I use a little trick. I like to call it tie bow. T stands for top, in, bottom, out. So what I mean by that is the 3 goes inside the division symbol, and the bottom, the 8, goes outside the division symbol. Now what we've learned from the division, or from division, is that we know 8 doesn't go into 3. So what we have to do is we're going to add a decimal to the 3, and the decimal goes straight up in our answer, and then we can add a 0 after. So now instead of 8 goes into 3, we're looking at 8 goes into 30. We know that 8 goes into 30 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. And notice where the decimal is. It goes straight up, so the decimal is to the left of that 3. The 3 is in the tenths place. I do 30 minus 24, which is 6. I still have a remainder, so I'm going to add another 0. And I'm going to bring that 0 down, and 8 goes into 60 7 times. Oh, sorry, I keep grabbing something on the top of the screen. So 8 goes into 67 times. All right, you guys, sorry. 7 times. There we go. And 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract. Get 4. Still have a remainder. So now I add another 0. Bring that 0 down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract, I get 0. Now I have no remainder. So I know that 3/8 equals 0.375, or 375 thousandths. Now we call this a terminating decimal. It's terminating because it ends. You end up with no remainder. So again, that is called a terminating decimal. Through the division, it ended with the 5, and you had 0 as a remainder. So fractions aren't always going to be terminating decimals. Sometimes when you divide, it's going to turn out differently. So let's look at this next problem. If I want you to change 2/11ths to a decimal, we're going to use Taibou. We're going to do top in, bottom out. So I am going to do 2 on the inside, 11 on the outside. Again, top in, bottom out. 11 doesn't go into 2, so I add a decimal into my problem and into my answer, and I add a 0. So 11 goes into 20 one time. That's 11. Subtract, I get 9. Still have a remainder, so I'm going to add another 0, bring it down. 11 goes into 90 8 times. That is 88. Subtract, I get 2, still have a remainder, so I'm going to add another 0. Bring down that 0. 11 goes into 20 one time. That's 11. Subtract to get 9. And I need to add another 0. I'm going to bring down that 0. So now I have 90. And that's going to be 8. So do you see what's happening here? Is I have 0.1818, and we have a pattern. It's going to be 90, 88, 20, 11. 90, 88, 20, 11. So when I look at what my answer is going to be, it's going to be 1800ths repeating. So to write that, I write the 1800ths, which is what's going to repeat over and over, and I draw a line over it to show that that's what's going to be repeating. And we call that a repeating decimal. So when you divide, that's what you're going to get. It's either going to be terminating or repeating. If it's repeating, you got to find exactly what's repeating and then put the line over it. Now, the last thing I want to show you, and the last thing I'm concerned about, is if you have a mixed number or an improper fraction. So let's say you have the fraction 15/4. First of all, you see that it's improper, so you know that it's going to be over 1. So we could use Taibou and do this exactly like we've done the other ones. We can put the 15 inside and the 4 outside, but this time the 4 actually goes into the whole number. It doesn't go into 1, but it does go into 15 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. Subtract, you get 3. We have a remainder, and there's no numbers left, so at this point you add your decimal and your 0. You bring that down. 4 goes into 37 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract, I get 2. I got to add another 0. Bring that down. That's 20. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. And I have 0. So I do have a terminating decimal. So I know that 15/4 is 3 75/100ths. Now, to make this a little bit easier, if you'd prefer not to divide with the 15, you could change your 15/4 to a mixed number right away. So if I take 15/4, oops, sorry about that. If I take 15/4 and I say, well, 4 goes into 15 3 times with 3/4 left over, I can look at 3 3/4 and know that the 3 is my whole number, so it's going to be 3 point, and then whatever 3/4 is. So then I only need to do Taibou to the 3/4 part of the problem. So if I take 4 divided into 3, 4 doesn't go into 3, so I add my decimal in the problem and the answer. I add a 0. There's my 7. 28. Subtract, I get 2. Add another 0 because I'm not done yet. Don't have a pattern or it hasn't terminated. 4 into 20 is 5. 5 times 4 is 20. And I do get 0. So I have 0.75, which will end up then after my whole number. So both times I get 3 and 75/100ths. It's your choice what to do. Okay, so now you are going to practice changing fractions to decimals. Remember to first check if your denominator goes into 100, and if it doesn't, then you're going to do the division. You're also going to be try comparing fractions and decimals. So what you're going to need to do is either change the decimals to fractions or change the fractions to decimals like we just learned and then compare them. All right, try it out. Let's see how we do.